today the ninth. We are closing the 9th edition, and we operate on the basis of a 2-year cycle. Behind this organization, there are 3 layers of goodwill, of support, and of commitment. And I would like to mention these 4 levels which are vital for the success of the prize. First, of course, there are partners, strategic partners and other partners that contribute to our finances and allow us to run this long journey. CFA Institute, Euroclear, SWIFT and SWIFT Institute, Pictet Group, and ACCA. This is the first layer. There is the second layer, which is the operational one, the team of the Observatoire. And I would like very warmly to thank Anna Soisson and Virgile Perret, who commit their efforts to the success of the prize. The third layer is the one of the jury that is composed of about 25 interdisciplinary members and experts in finance, both from theory and from practice. And finally, the fourth layer, without which nothing would happen, are the authors of the essays from academia and professional world, from civil society, and also from public bodies, who have taken the challenge to respond to our invitation to write an essay, to formulate their views and to share them with us. Many of you are aware that the almost 30 years of history of the Observatoire is devoted to the better alignment of financial activities and profession to the requirements of the common good. Today, this challenge is even more visible than maybe 20 years ago, because of sustainability issue that is taking much attention of the world. We are a few days before the COP28, and we know all the hopes that are related, linked to it. So we have to keep it in mind when we're discussing the issues of ethics and finance. It's not the only point where ethics comes into play with finance, but is one of the important ones. So we have 3 moments in this ceremony. We will have 2 important addresses from eminent personalities from the world of finance. Then we'll have a roundtable discussion moderated by Josina Kamerling from CFA Institute in Belgium. And we have the proper ceremony of the prize when we identify the winners and give a floor to them and be able to have some exchange with them in order to better know their background. So let's turn to the first speaker, which is Monsieur Jean-Paul Servais. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. You are chair of the Belgian Financial Services and Market Authorities, and you are also chair of the board of IOSCO. So you are the boss of world financial regulators, market regulators. As you say, you devoted a lot of your energy as IOSCO chairman to streamline regulation related to cryptocurrencies and to financial innovation. So thank you very much. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for your kind words. I don't deserve. Sorry. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure for me to be involved in this very important event. Very important event because the young generation is involved. And I think it's important to stress that, because whenever there is a problem about the first contact between the young generation, new consumer, new client, and the financial sector, and some question about, I would say, the ethics, it means by definition a question about trust. And as we all know, trust can very rapidly disappear, and it takes a long time before trust is coming back, and it's especially the case when we speak about sustainable finance. So, and that's the reason I think, Professor, ladies and gentlemen, that it's not exaggerated to say that if you are attending this virtual ceremony, it means that you take a strong interest in the issue of ethics and finance. And as you know, IOSCO, it's one of the few real global membership organizations of financial supervisors. It's indeed IOSCO, a global body committed to fostering stability, fair treatment of investor, and of course, integrity in financial market. And this is why I was honored by your invitation to speak today, to preach, if I may call it that, to the core about the paramount importance of ethics in finance. It has to be stressed about this aspect and these challenges that IOSCO has a long history. And even I think it's rather objective to stress that even a successful record of accomplishment in developing principles and standards that enhance the integrity of financial markets and fair conduct of market intermediaries. Allow me just to remind you that IOSCO is an international body that brings together 130 regulators of financial market from all around the world. As you know, there are a bit less than 200 independent states around the world. Also very important to state is that IOSCO members are involved in various capacities at national level in the supervision of almost 95% of the financial sector around the world. So what does it mean about our DNA, about our mission state? It means that our mission is to first foster efficient and well-functioning markets, protect investors, and ensure the integrity of securities market. In essence, I would say we are not a cross-border supervisor like the SSM, the Single Supervisory Mechanism in Frankfurt, but we serve as a standard setter for global regulation of financial market. So what does it mean? It means that I would say most of the time you will have key principle, high-level principle drafted at IOSCO level. It was the case already 30 years ago about UCITS, mutual funds, then benchmark, hedge funds, I would say rating agency, and then it's translated at regional level. That's the case in the EU, or at national level, in order to be proposed on a voluntary basis or to be translated as a binding standard. And our mission, I would say, is, of course, to be able to match the expectation of our members. And from this point of view, I think that it's important to know that the IOSCO membership is varied, and our members come from different cultural and historical backgrounds, sometimes also with different value and definition of ethics. We also have a majority of growth and emerging markets, more than 90 jurisdictions. So we are in some way, I would say, the United Nations, even I think that we never vote, I would say it's consensus vote, but I think that it takes less time at IOSCO than from time to time at EU level. We are also about diversity, you know, the famous advertising of Benetton. In the 90s, we are a copy and paste of United Colors of Benetton of securities regulator. So our ADN is, our DNA, sorry, it's also about diversity. But at the same time, financial markets are interconnected globally, making the need for ethical conduct at a global level absolutely crucial. What does it mean? If you have a look on the, I would say, the work produced by IOSCO, it means that IOSCO, through this well-known principle for securities regulation, underscores the significance of integrity, transparency, and fairness in fostering investor confidence in market integrity. Also important to say is that these principles are accepted by the FSB. You know, I would say that FSB instrumental. FSB is the right wing of the G20 leaders. And just for examination, in the last letter sent by Knas Knot, the current chair of the FSB, to the G20 leaders in July, 4 pages, always very useful for students to read it. You have a good overview of all the new risks and challenges for the financial sector. 2 of the 4 pages are in fact linked by what we are doing at IOSCO level about crypto assets, sustainable finance, the former shadow banking, now called non-banking financial intermediation. And that's the reason why I think that I'm very happy and even proud to say that these principles are accepted by the FSB as key standards. And as you know, the FSB is there as right arm of the G20 to ensure financial stability with a view of inclusive and sustainable economic growth which is crucial for the welfare of our population. Ethics and finance is not merely a regulatory requirement. Let us be clear. It's not about paper, it's not about standards, it's about your future for professional activity. It's not only, I would say, the job for the compliance officer, it's the job at all levels of the management, the CEO, board of supervisors, audit committee, I would say a legal service, risk management. And that's the reason why I think that it's not exaggerated to say that ethics in finance is the foundation upon which trust is built. As custodian of the financial system, we, the community of security regulators, IOSCO ecosystem, in other words, recognize that public confidence is correlated to the ethical behavior of market participants. And one of the key pillars of ethics in finance is about the fair treatment of investors, which includes ensuring that investors are provided with clear, accurate, and trustable information, allowing them to make informed decisions. Always the point of view of investment is instrumental in this. And these ethical considerations are particularly relevant as we navigate an era of rapid transformational changes in the likes of climate change and digitization of financial services. If we speak in a nutshell about climate change and sustainable finance, it is obvious, it is evident to the young professional that you are, these students, ladies and gentlemen, that financial markets have a pivotal role to play in channeling capital towards sustainable projects. You don't expect from the financial sector that they will be instrumental in order to find a solution from a technical point, in order to fight against the climate change. You expect from the financial sector that if we want to ensure an added value of the financial sector, that they can channel savings to the targets, to companies, financial products which are in line with your ESG expectations. But at the same time, let us be clear, it can create fundamental risk of greenwashing. I have also the pleasure to be in a family with four kids, in fact, young adults like you. And when I discuss the issue, I can tell you, first comment, yes, but greenwashing. Let us try to have a positive, I would say, approach about this, to take on responsibility. That's the reason why IOSCO was involved in the journey about how to develop a common language, I would say, for thousands and thousands of companies, which is the best way to avoid greenwashing. And we know that it's important because investors don't want and should not be greenwashed. The investor want to know how the investment in company could be affected by climate change. They want to be able to compare investment opportunities and take informed decisions in consideration. What does it mean for IOSCO? With IOSCO, our work in the domain of sustainable finance is aimed at broadly three objectives. First, allowing investors to make investor decisions both about risk and opportunity based on sound information. Second, promoting market structure that function with integrity, even as they seek to grow to meet environment objectives. And last but not least, ensuring the resilience of the financial system to the risk from climate change. In short, what does it mean? It means bringing sufficient trust and integrity in the market so investors can make informed decisions about their capital allocation while knowing the chances of them being subject to greenwashing of other fraudulent activities is mitigated. We appreciate this risk, and you have been working very hard to improve the quality of trustworthiness of sustainability disclosure. What does it mean? Because we have our own accountability, I would say, and that is to be said, the world is changing, because in less than 2 years after its establishment, the well-known ISSB, International Sustainability Standard Board, working under the umbrella of the IFRS Foundation, published inaugural standards S1, S2 for climate disclosure and general requirement in June. In July, I have the pleasure to organize a virtual press conference in Belgium, in Brussels, with a lot of press coverage. We concluded 1 month after we challenged the draft for more than 1 year with the ISSB. In July, we concluded that the ISSB framework serves as an effective and proportionate global framework of investor-focused disclosure on sustainability-related risk. What does it mean, an endorsement? We don't have any political legitimacy. I don't have any political. The political legitimacy is at national level. But it means that our endorsement should give us so-called impetus for jurisdiction to consider whether they adopt, apply, or be informed by the ISSB framework for the domestic use. This will bring us a long way in tackling risk of greenwashing as issue preparers and investors around the world begin to speak the same language. That's a step-by-step approach. Danger is to think, and I think it's important to say that to the young generation. I used to be young as well, but 40 years ago. So patience is not what you are interested. But it's the danger would be to think that we can be perfect in one day. It's how to go from how to go from A to B. First thing first, to have this capacity to speak the same language when we release information disclosure about sustainable finance. Well, ladies and gentlemen, dear students, thanks to the endorsement of ISSB standard, we know that at the end of the day, 130,000 companies, I repeat, 130,000 companies, will over time be reporting under or be informed by ISSB standards. So what does it mean? If we are speaking the same language with different accents, more data to extract with giant database used through public-private partnership, more data mean more capacity to avoid greenwashing, and more capacity at the end of the day to use, I would say, efficient, robust transition plan. But there is another aspect which has to be ensured. It's about trust, because disclosure needs to be trusted, which is why we need also global arrangements for independent assurance of the disclosure. So it means involvement of auditors. I would say it's always a good idea, at least when you are a public company, to check and to accept the challenge to be made by auditors. And the independent audit standard setting body in charge of updating the relevant international technical and ethical standards have made significant progress in recent months. That's also what I challenge with them in my capacity as IOSCO chair. And these standards, one about ethical, the other one about technical audit standards, and are on track to finalize this in time for the first set of 2024 audit report. The question of ethics and finance has also come to the fore in another debate, which is, I think, also something very important for you as new consumer, that's the debate on the regulation asset services and asset operate on distributed ledger, such as crypto assets and decentralized finance. Again, why IOSCO on board? You know, this business, the risk and opportunities are never, I would say, at a pure national level. By definition, we are speaking about cross-border challenges, risk and opportunity and fraud. So that's the reason why we took action as well. And that's the reason why, together with the rise of crypto assets, we have regretted to observe numbers of false promises, scams, and new forms of risk for investors. And as we navigate an era of rapid technological advancement, the ethical application of innovation cannot be. We are not against innovation. We are supportive financial innovation. We are not working in an ivory tower. So it means that we take action, and it means that IOSCO, cognizant of these challenges, continue to work on adapting its principle to address the evolving landscape, emphasizing the ethical use of technology in finance. What does it mean? 2 weeks ago, I was in Singapore. I presume that many of you know what it means. The famous FinTech week in Singapore, absolutely unbelievable to see more than 66,000 people, I would say, in this kind of event. A lot of interest, discussion about the new world, the digital world. And for me, it was also an opportunity, being in Singapore with my colleagues from different national supervisors, to present IOSCO final report for the regulation of crypto and digital assets. And if you look on the website managed by IOSCO, you will find this new toolkit, the first one to be released at international level about the cross-border supervision of a virtual asset service provider. And this is an important milestone, ladies and gentlemen, because the absence of a current regulatory approach across the region poses, as we know, challenges of regulatory arbitrage given the borderless nature of crypto assets. And the IOSCO report highlights, therefore, that existing standards and principles for financial markets are relevant and must apply to crypto asset and service providers. So again, we're not promoting revolution, just to copy and paste principles we are used to work with for the supervision for more than 30 years for asset management, hedge fund, of trading venue, stock exchange. Maybe one comment, and it would be one of my last one, Professor, we are also working in parallel on the finalization of recommendation for the other work stream relating to the digital world. It's also about trust, and that's the supervision of DeFi, decentralized finance, which will be finalized before the end of the year. And I just would like to highlight one of the key recommendations from the consultation report, which makes it explicit that even in so-called pretended decentralized arrangement, the responsibility lies somewhere and must be borne by the relevant player, so it means everybody. Just allow me to quote this recommendation too. Regulators should identify the natural person and entities of a purported DeFi arrangement and activity that could be subject to applicable regulatory framework, and should carefully examine any claim that an arrangement of activity is decentralized to a point that no person of entities and responsible. What does it mean for you, ladies and gentlemen? And that's my last message. It means, in conclusion, that the pursuit of ethical conduct and finance is not a mere regulatory obligation. It's not about paper. It's not about standards that you forget. No, it's about your day-to-day experience. If you are not able to have a robust compliance system, by definition, it will be a problem with your client. If you want to have a sustainable relationship with your client, please be aware of this and not think that it's a mere regulatory obligation. Pursuit of ethical conduct and finance is a shared responsibility to safeguard the integrity of a global financial system. And IOSCO, through its steadfast commitment to ethical principles, stand as a guiding regulators and market participants towards a future where financial markets operate with transparency, fairness, and unwavering integrity. Allow me, last but not least, that will be my last message, to congratulate the authors for the excellent paper, and good luck, I would say also, for your career, and congratulations again. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Servais, for this expose that was very interesting. You showed the systemic move in the direction of sustainability. You have fundamentally stressed the importance and the difficulty to elaborate principles. And I think IOSCO plays a very important role in this field. And then these principles are accommodated in national legislation, not national settings. But bearing in mind that there is a common denominator, I think it's fundamental. You showed what IOSCO is doing in the direction of sustainability, but also in direction of financial innovation, crypto assets, and digitalization. So thank you very much. And thank you very much for being with us. And we are happy to connect with IOSCO in this endeavor of ethics and trust in finance global prize. Let me now turn to Helen Brand. Helen is chief executive of Association of Chartered and Certified Accountants, a global body operating in 181 jurisdictions, with which Helen is to a large extent familiar. She has been holding this important position since 2008, and also she is the founding member of the International Integrated Reporting Council and the successor organizations. And she is also close to universities as she advises many. She sits on the advisory bodies of many universities. And Helen and the ACCA are long-term partners of the prize. So Helen, the word is yours. Thank you very much once again for being with us.
Thank you, Professor Deminsky, and hello everyone. It's such a pleasure to join you for today's grand occasion, and I'm delighted to add my congratulations and thanks to all the talented people who've entered for the wonderful awards. I'm especially happy to take part because these awards we present today acknowledge achievement in an area that's central to the purpose of ACCA, and indeed to all finance professionals. That is how we place ethics and trust at the heart of finance. And it's really satisfying and encouraging that these awards are contested specifically by young finance professionals. It drives home what we know to be true, that the professionals of the future, the business leaders of tomorrow, must be keenly aware of the unique ethical challenges that arise now in an era where finance is increasingly shaped by the power of technology. And I'll say more about that in a moment. For now, I'd like to introduce you to a theme that has influenced ACCA's work in this field in recent times. The theme is just 5 words long, but these words imply a whole world of ideas, issues, and opportunities for finance professionals. And the theme is ethics for a better world. And it's all about how finance professionals can apply their ethical standards to make a difference, not just in business, but in a broader sense in their communities and across society. Let me set the scene by describing how ACCA sees the ethical landscape for accountants right now. To begin with, it's not the same as it was even just a few years ago. Ethical issues used to be easier to navigate. We lived in a world where matters of integrity were usually clear-cut. If a particular activity looked wrong, felt wrong, smelt wrong, it probably was wrong. Accountants could largely guarantee that the advice, just do the right thing, was sufficient to cover most situations. When finance professionals did take a wrong turn, it had more to do with negligence or even outright criminality than any ethical failure of judgment. Almost always there was a path to follow, which was obvious to anyone who was determined to work with honesty according to the highest standards of professional conduct. Now, not so simple. The rapid spread of automation, big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, AI, a much greater sensitivity to issues such as sustainability and fairness in business have made the old maps irrelevant. In a world where decisions and processes are increasingly delegated to machines, bots, and algorithms, it isn't so easy for accountants to bring their professional judgment to bear on every aspect of business activity as they would have done in the pre-tech times. Human intuition and experience are no longer enough. All this means that accountants must take a much more active role in insisting that the human element remains at the centre of business activity, despite the temptations to cut costs and corners and let technology take the wheel. The theme gives us a timely opportunity to share our message that professional accountants are perfectly placed to provide the strong ethical leadership and decision-making which businesses and the world need now more than ever. The ethical outlook of the professional accountant is essential for any healthy business, and it leads to an important statement that colours everything ACCA believes about accountants' responsibilities and how we navigate these murky digital waters. Simply put, the ethical element is what separates us from the machines. I should also say that ACCA's ethical dedication is as old as the organisation itself and predates not just digital technology, but also television, air travel, and rock and roll. It began its existence motivated by a sense of ethics as a moral choice, not just good business discipline. Bringing an ethical approach to business has been part of ACCA's mission ever since we were founded in 1904. Crucially for our subject today, every single ACCA accountant is steeped in the values of ethical behaviour. Ethics are a fundamental part of our qualification. You can't qualify for ACCA membership without a clear knowledge of what ethical practice means and why it's so important. I want to say a little more about why a dedication to ethical practice places professional accountants at the forefront of defending the public interest, and why all organisations, businesses, and public bodies must build good ethical practice into their decision-making for the good of society, for the good of their own success, and for their own survival. It matters more than ever before now because the human element, the ethical dimension, is in danger of being sidelined by artificial intelligence, data analytics, and machine learning. We got very early warning of the disasters that can happen when ethical oversight is left out of the decision-making process on the morning of the 19th of October, 1987. It was the day when a new kind of challenge dawned for the global economy. What happened on that fateful Black Monday was different because economic catastrophes in the past had been human-made, a function of people's actions. But this emergency was triggered by an algorithm. It played out like this. The money markets were already in trouble. Military maneuvers in the Gulf made investors nervous, and a hurricane in the UK disturbed the insurance sector. But what sent the global economy to the edge of the cliff was people's willingness to leave the analytical function, the quality testing, the judgment element to an algorithm. AI created the first ripple of disruption on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. An unforeseen coding bug meant that when the stocks fell to a certain price, an automatic sell order kicked in across AI-powered dealing systems. The surge of auto selling began in Asia, triggering a price landslide that swept through Europe and consumed Wall Street when America went to work. It was an unstoppable flood of trade which sent already shaky share prices crashing through the floor. In an instant, trillions of dollars of value were wiped out, beggaring businesses, ruining individuals, and pauperizing pension funds. This was more than an IT issue, though. It was the greatest failure of ethics, control, and systems in the history of commerce. The world's financial guardians weren't asleep at the wheel, they weren't even at the wheel. And the crash of 2008 was also built on unethical failure and the eagerness of big financial institutions to bet the future of the world economy on a US subprime housing market that was built on quicksand. So it's happened before, it can happen again. The only difference is next time it will happen on a much, much bigger scale as AI, machine learning, and the replacement of algorithms for human oversight seep ever deeper into the tissues and sinews of our economic life systems. It would be wrong to speak about ethics without talking about another burning issue of our age, and of course that is sustainability. This has rocketed up the agenda for businesses and governments everywhere in the face of rising climate crisis and growing unfairness and instability in economies and societies around the world. More than ever, finance professionals work in a world where the way we keep score in business is changing, where impacts on communities and the environment count as much as profit and loss in the way that business success is measured. The steady advance of sustainability standards and reporting around the world thrusts finance professionals into the forefront of efforts to build a better, fairer, and more sustainable world. Finance professionals are called on to use their technical skills and ethical outlook to serve as assurance experts in the increasingly influential field of sustainability, bringing the expertise which business needs to understand and act on global and national sustainability standards, and to guard against unethical practice which undermines the drive towards true business sustainability, notably greenwashing and fraudulent claims which paint an inaccurate picture of a business's true activity in these areas. My final message today is this, that our philosophy of ethics as we venture further into the digital age, our beliefs as business leaders, as finance professionals, as citizens, places the human element at the heart of our decision making. The job of finance professionals is to see the big picture and to raise their voices in favour of an ethical way of conducting business and public policy so that digital technology is used as a tool for the benefit of society, so that it is our servant, not our master. This is especially important because increasingly professional accountant skills are applied far beyond the traditional areas associated with the work of the accountant or the auditor. Accountants are trained and equipped to thrive in every financial and business scenario imaginable, and most carry out functions that exceed the orthodox, old-fashioned and outmoded definition of what accountants do. They are strategic thinkers, leaders and innovators. The new world demands new skills, and we rise to meet those challenges. It begins with the professionals of the future, like our excellent award winners and nominees today. And it's ACCA's belief that if professionals embrace three universal values, they can play their vital role in working with integrity, dedication and wisdom, and crucially, serving as the defender of the public interest. And they are a determination to understand digital technology as it advances, with all its pulses, perils, and pitfalls, displaying the confidence to apply our knowledge in real-world situations, and thinking globally with a consistent ethical framework guiding the profession. These are all important, not just for the finance profession, although they are certainly that. They're also vital for the organisations where they work and which they represent. After all, a huge challenge for businesses and governments in the decades to come will be this world that is such a big part of these awards we celebrate today, and that is trust. How far customers and citizens are prepared to support them, vote for them, and trade with them in an environment where all transactions are based on the exchange of data. To conclude, it's really important that we're not seeing these fundamental principles as a basic minimum for ethical compliance. I've shared a few thoughts on what ethic means for today's world, and also a few warnings about what has happened and will happen again if professionals abandon ethical behaviour. These are the big questions facing us in the new digital age. How people respond will decide the future of the profession for decades to come. So back to my message from before, the ethical element is what separates us from the machines. The role of professionals in these next decades is to protect that human element, that ability and willingness to assess ethical consequences and act upon them. It's about blending the emotional qualities and digital sense I spoke about and ensuring that ethical integrity survives and flourishes however history plays out in the years to come. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Brand, for your very engaging speech. It's very complementary from what we have heard before from Mr. Servais. Regulation is one set, but in order to operate regulation, to put them in motion, etc., you need professionals, and in order to have good professionals, you need this ethical awareness. And I think what you said about the activity of ACCA is very important. The document Ethics for a Better World shows that it's not only internal to the financial sphere, it reaches outside, and I think this is very common to what this is similar to what we try to do with finance and the common good approach when we started the Observatoire. There is the real economy, there is society, and finance is somewhere in the middle, and I think it's fundamental. I liked very much what you said. Ethics is what distinguishes us from the machines. And you have to cultivate this element, even if it probably requires every day more courage, because it's so easy to hide behind regulations and to hide beyond the process or machine-alimented decision. So thank you very much for this. And now we turn to the second part of the ceremony. I leave the floor to Josina Kamerling. I hope you can, both Helen Brand and Jean-Paul Servais, you can stay with us for the next half an hour, and I give the floor to Josina Kamerling to manage and to moderate the roundtable.
Thank you very much, Paul. So welcome to everybody. We're now going to turn our attention to a panel discussion where we're going to look at how to promote ethics in finance amongst the new generation. Because of course, the prize winners today, but those who took part in the prize competition are all under 35s, and that is actually the very reason that this prize was created. And I know because I did check the audience that Carol Cosgrove is in the audience. Wouldn't have existed without her, because it was her conversations with her son, who was 35 at that stage, about a concern in ethics that started this prize. So Carol, your work is continued, and thank you for being in the audience. So let me quickly introduce, and I still cannot see my panelists, I'm afraid. So I'm going blind, I have to say. Let me introduce our panelists today. So we have Ilko Fjola, who's co-founder and managing partner of Alpha Governance Partners. And of course, it's my pleasure because Ilko is also a CFA charter holder and has been working with me. We've been having discussions about ethics for many, many years now. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Ilko. Next, Adam McLean, who is Group Legal and Compliance Risk Manager at Euroclear. And Adam, okay, it's also been my pleasure to discuss with you on several occasions. Compliance is an important function, as we've heard before, and I'll be looking forward to some of your comments. Next, we have Mr. Bruno Roche, who is an economist, entrepreneur, speaker, and author. And I look forward to his vision on where we're going with this whole sustainable revolution, what ethics has at the heart of it. And last but not least, Mrs. Marta Rocchi, who is an assistant professor in corporate governance and business ethics at the DCU Business School and a former winner of the Ethics and Trust in Finance. And so that, of course, is always interesting. In the panel discussions we have at the awards, we always have a past prize winner because they won the prize. They have used also their win in term to further, of course, their position and discussion on ethics. So this is really key. Now, I know that we're running a little bit late, so I'm going to also be quite strict with my panelists. But let me first turn to Ilko, because in the discussion we had previous to this panel, we were talking about really how important it is to be educated on ethical principles and social values that would guide you in your career. Because it's not just about profit anymore, is it? We need to think about other things, but how do we reach young people? How do we look at that education? You gave some examples of what you're doing with your own son to make him aware. Yes. And so I thought that was really interesting. So Ilko, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Josina. And I think it's also appropriate to mention that besides running a governance partnership, I'm also an adjunct professor of finance ethics at HEC Lausanne, and I've been lecturing the subject for almost 14 years now. That was an excellent question. The thing is that the profit focus, I think nowadays we can find profit focus in solving problems for society, i.e. Not just making money in a way with activities that make us just money, but literally looking at, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals and say, what can I contribute, what my company can contribute, what can my startup contribute in order to solve a problem. And when we solve a problem, there is a market for it, and there's literature out there which discusses this at quite some length. So I think that generations, i.e. young generation, people that are graduating now, can find satisfaction and apply ethics, if you will, in a way of solving problems for society, be them social problems or environmental problems. It's a way of expressing ethics, let's say. Now, if you go one level before, obviously I'm not an academic in that field in how to raise kids, but yes, you're right, Josina. When we discussed it, I very much like the approach that Aristotle took or prescribes and says the world is a messy place, and if we want to make the right decision, we should train ourselves and train our kids with virtues. And so when the problems are on the desk or in front of kids, then they can hopefully make the right decision as they are trained in decision making and developing virtues. And that is, in a way, being exposed to situations outside of our own bubbles. So yes, I gave you the example where I'm taking my son, and where I'm based in Switzerland. I'm taking my son to Bangladesh very soon. I've been taking him to other parts of Africa, other parts of Asia, for him to understand that he's developing skills now, and at some stage he will be working, and hopefully he will be doing something good for the world by just having seen things. Also realization that ethical problems or problems to be solved, let me say it like this, are always closer than we think. And so we don't need to be very abstract in this. We can just look around us and see what are things that we can solve for. In the end, if we talk about terms like stakeholders are just people like you and me and all people around us. And so we don't need to be too abstract in this in order to have ethics lived as a lived value, if you will.
Ilko, thank you. Thank you very much for that, and also raising that issue of being practical and not seeing it as an abstract theme, because it's very easy to put things away saying, oh yeah, you know, it's very far away. And yes, we have an ethics code, and yes, you know, but really how I'm doing with it. And my own daughter at age 13, I think, was saying to me, okay, you're speaking a lot at conference, but what are you really doing? You know, to that point, what was I doing? Not just speaking, right? Marta, I'm going to turn to you next. You were awarded the first prize of the Ethics and Trust in Finance back in 2019. What inspired you to participate? And how did you continue to focus on ethics? Let's get a practical case now. Marta, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi, Josina. Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. And yeah, so I met Josina in Paris in 2019 at the OECD headquarters, and it was a great meeting. I got to the prize because I was doing my PhD in ethics in finance, using a new Aristotelian framework to frame the discourse on finance ethics. As everyone knows, the prize is open to both academics and practitioners. So I always want to stress this because I think this is very important that all the voices are taken into account.
Very good point. Yeah.
And the prize was directed to people under 35. And so I thought, like, okay, this is my year. I need to go. I really wanted to try to make a contribution. Didn't expect to win the prize, which was nice. And now I think it's very important to cultivate this culture of ethics in finance, and also to promote intellectual reflection on ethics in finance, because everyone thinks ethics is important, but when we come to terms with the question, what is ethics? It is very hard to define unless you study it. So the prize was for sure an additional stimulus during my PhD journey to delve further into these topics. So regarding how I keep researching on this, my essay was on ethics in fintech in particular, with a specific agent-centered lens. So taking Elko, already mentioned him. I met Elko in Paris that year as well, with a special lens taken from a neo-Aristotelian philosopher. And currently, I still work in ethics in finance, of course, following more the development of artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence is shaping the finance industry, and what are the implications from an ethical point of view for those who design and use AI-based technologies in finance. And last, I think the other way of keep myself updated is that the Observatoire de la Finance asked me to be part of the jury this year. So I'm in a double role today here in the panel. And so I was very happy to be in this. Let's say we're creating a community, right?
Yes.
And so this is really it. So thanks.
No, and I think what you said about creating a community is important. And I say this to our audience who's listening, and also to the prize winners. I feel that community. I reach out to that community in my work, and I'm very interested always in keeping track of the prize winners and anyone who participated in the essay. We're going to go a little bit now into the actual world of work. And I think it was interesting what Helen Brand said, and Paul repeated it, which was, you know, the ethical element is what separates us from machines. And we're facing a complex world, one where compliance officers like Adam McLean are really going to find their jobs cut out. Young people who are working in finance are having not just a master in finance where you might be taught ethics, but they might come from engineering, philosophy, IT. Therefore, there is not perhaps such a strong foundation, although perhaps we'll hear later from Marta what is being changed at the university level for this. But at the moment, there's not really a strong culture in some of the other university studies. So how can they develop ethical skills when they reach that workplace where they hear, yes, there's an ethical, you know, we have a code of ethics and you can subscribe to it. But as we at CFA Institute have also found is, you know, you have to give voice to value. You have to be able to speak up about it, know what to do. How does a young person face those conduct of business challenges? Adam, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And actually, it's absolutely true. We don't have people coming from pure financial backgrounds working in finance, but actually, we're probably better for it. We need that knowledge and experience to come through and really reinforce the industry. So, and of course, actually, we see it in the prize as well. We have a real diversity of backgrounds coming through. And I'll just say congratulations to the finalists as well. But how then, if you're not coming through an economics course or a law course where you have a specific course on ethics, how do you get that awareness? Well, with a great amount of positivity and pride, I see that the younger generations and mine as well are already very aware and very active in ethical concerns. We speak up a lot about the environment, but we're also engaging a lot about green finance. And it's something that Euroclear does on a professional level, but it's also, there's a lot more discussion about it in the media because there's a lot more appetite for it. So already that underlying appetite is there, and that's a really good thing to see. Now, when people reach into the industry, it's really then up to the companies themselves to encourage the good behavior. And that's normally done through code of ethics, through training, through the making available the opportunities to speak up, but also having that comfort that you're going to be trusted and that the company is listening to you. There are a lot of laws that are also require this to be in place, but it's good business practice to have it as well, to be a great place to work. There are huge cultural shifts that have come about, particularly since COVID. You'll see the mass teleworking has really changed the way that we work. And there seems to be a lot more focus on the well-being of the worker. And I think when the worker sees the company adapting to their needs, you feel a bit more connected, and it's generally creating a much nicer environment to be in. And when people are happy and comfortable, they're going to be acting a bit more ethically as well. So I think the combination of having a better awareness of the issues, a generation that are feeling comfortable and able to speak up to defend their values, and having industry that are feeling the need to bring those values into their company and benefiting from it. We see productivity hasn't dropped since COVID. So there is value in supporting these positive values. And that can only be a good thing. And we're really seeing that there's a big engagement from it. And the awareness doesn't necessarily need to be pushed in your face. It's already there. We just need to be encouraging people to be talking about it.
Yeah, and I think you raised really some quite crucial issues. You know, COVID has changed a lot, the online world, where, yes, we feel more comfortable. We may sometimes, you know, work with a business jacket and pajamas at the bottom, as, you know, we have seen many examples, but also the ability to work from home if there are difficulties. It does make it more difficult for young people to connect with each other, though. And, you know, one of my fears always has been, when I see this new world we're all in, is this isolation. And, you know, I think we are gregarious. We need to be together. We learn off each other. So I do hope that probably the next prize will be in person again, because it is important to connect, although it is also useful to see each other and be able to do it online. And you mentioned also, you know, that these young people need to be made aware that, you know, where can they go to? Who can they speak to? And I think that's important. I'm going to turn to Bruno Roche. And before that, I'm just going to mention, because this came to my mind as you were speaking, is that this, the ethics and the awareness of what you have to do has also come out in the Edelman Trust Survey, which is a yearly survey on trust with people around the world answering questions. And what has come out in the recent editions is really that people are turning away from governments, are turning away from organizations to look to companies where they work for as taking action on their behalf, on behalf of society and to be responsible. So actually, you know, companies are faced with a lot more responsibility. And that is, again, where, you know, this whole ethics discussion then becomes very important, because you have, at the same time, all these changes at the global level with the digital era, with geopolitics, with, you know, we need to be very careful how we manage this changing focus. And I think that then turns me to Bruno, because many of the problems related to the environmental and societal degradation are linked to the profit maximization doctrine and financial approach to value creation. And so again, you know, when we repair that system, we need to go beyond that profit maximization. Bruno, when you look at sort of the different roles of accountants, investors, and regulators, what is your advice, and how can we set about going beyond that profit maximization? Bruno, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Josina. And actually, it's good to be among people who think. I don't think we think alike, but we think in the same. Well, I don't think we think the same way, but we think alike. And yeah, I've been. I mean, thank you for introduction. On top of your introduction, I also been the chief economist of Mars Incorporated. So I come from the corporate sector, and I've also been developing a lot of research with Oxford University. So I come from, if you like, the corporate sector and academic sector. And if you think about it, you talked about systemic problem and systemic solutions. And I mean, I've been working on this topic for the last 15 years. And you don't need to be a genius to understand that actually the profit maximization model is actually destroying value. And today we need about 1.8 planets for an economy that doesn't grow, right? And eventually the model creates a top 1% that actually owns as much as the 50% of the bottom. So again, that system is not sustainable. You don't need to PhD in economics or in science or in philosophy to know that that system is actually leading to global destruction. Having said that, we know the solutions, right? We know what it is. It's actually it's about reinterpreting the role of profits. And in the old traditions, you know, the concept of margin, the word margin, is coming from the margin of the field. And the margin of the field is what you leave to the poor. You don't harvest everything, and you always leave a bit of grain at the margin of the field. So if you want to maximize your margin, you maximize what you leave to the other people. And in a sense, this concept of greed, the love of money, which actually some theologians describe it as the source of all kinds of evil, is eventually destroying the world. Having said that, there have been many attempts over the last 15, 20 years to show that there is a higher level of value creation that is not based just on profit maximization. I mean, if you think about it, slavery, for instance, was an excellent economic model. You create empire with slavery, but nevertheless, when slavery was removed, eventually, even if you forget the moral dimension, when slavery was removed, actually the growth of the economy even went to a higher level. So my argument is that at the moment, half of the humanity is in slavery condition, and the earth is also in slavery condition. And it doesn't mean that that system doesn't work, but it means it's actually suboptimum. And if it goes to high extremes, it will eventually destroy the world. And in economics, it's all about the management of scarcity, isn't it? And so 50 years ago, financial capital was scarce and natural resources were overly abundant. Today is just the opposite. So financial capital is overly abundant and you have all the forms of scarcity in the system. So you don't need to be an ideologist to realize that the system will adjust somehow. It could adjust through catastrophic event, right? But it could also adjust through research, education, and also regulation. So my point is that, I mean, I came to the conclusion that the system will not reform itself. I mean, actually, the key players, finance and business, which are the center of the problem, right, have no incentive to reform themselves. The system has been designed by them, for them, and actually to work for them. So the most enlightened leaders will eventually be trying to be less bad right? But less bad is still bad, isn't it? So in a sense, I think we cannot expect people to solve the problem with the same level of consciousness that created it. So therefore, the solution will have to come from an outside perspective. And the two outside pillars, or the two outside external pressure that can actually, we can think of pushing the system in a different direction, is one, regulation, and the other one is education. And regulation is actually moving fast. I mean, I'm glad Jean-Paul mentioned the ISSB and the CSRD, because essentially it's a way to level the playing field. So to put everybody on the same level. And actually government will find a way to monetize the negative externalities through taxation. And the taxonomy that will come out of the CSRD and the ISSB will actually be used by government to identify the bad guys and tax them. And you know what? I mean, taxing the bad guys is very popular from a political perspective. It's very difficult to increase taxes on labor or consumption or capital, but taxing the bad guys politically makes a lot of sense. And actually the Chinese got it. And actually the Chinese are way ahead of the game on this particular topic. But regulation is one side. The other one is education. But education is not enough, because actually education is not a bulwark against barbarism. I mean, being educated doesn't mean you will be ethical. It's I mean, all the dignitaries of the Nazi regime had PhDs and master's degrees, right? So education is not a bulwark against barbarism. And actually, what you see, what's happening these days, even the top elite of the West Coast in America, I mean, frankly speaking, you say, wow, where are the ethics in their argument? And they are the higher education people. So education is not the only one. So I think my personal vision is that, you know, we need to completely revamp and restore and transform the curriculum of management schools. Today, 1/3 of all the students who graduate from university graduate from management school. It's a lot. We don't need as many business people, by the way. We need more scientists, we need more doctors, artists, whatever. But the good news is that this management school concentrate 1/3, about 70 million of all the upcoming leaders. The problem today is that we are still teaching economics and business the old way. And in a sense, my vision, my dream would be actually that over the next few years, we would teach the neoliberalism as part of history. And because actually entrepreneurship existed before capitalism and will exist after capitalism. Entrepreneurship is part of human activities, part of human DNA. And capitalism is eventually just a small parenthesis in the history of entrepreneurship. So I think there is a solution is actually to pull these two triggers. The first one is to actually ensure that the thinking I was very pleased actually that the work we've done with Oxford University and Mars on this concept of an economy of mutuality has been used by the CSRD as a way to promote the concept of double materiality, which actually is a form of mutuality between business and its ecosystem. So we should never underestimate the power of ideas. And I think actually the CSRD will eventually be a superior model that will eventually put itself at the GDPR. But at the same time, the young people or the existing leaders need to be equipped not only to comply with this upcoming regulation that actually will hopefully spread around the world, but also realize that there is a higher level of value creation, which is not actually based on exploitation. It's not coming from like financial value extraction from a value chain, but it's more about a higher value of mutual value creation among stakeholders. And that teaching actually, in my view, will help trigger the needle. Last bit, because I like to change to.
But I'm going to have to cut you very short. Maybe I'll give you time after it, unless you can do it in because I need to give the floor to others as well. But go ahead.
The last thing that I was surprised about your statistics about government and non-government, because the last statistic I saw from Deloitte's panel is that it showed something very clearly that the younger generations, the Gen Z and the millennials, have more trust in government than in business. The higher generation, the boomers and the Gen X, have higher trust in government than in business. sorry, in business and government. So I think the younger generation have more trust, or they trust less business than government. So I think that shift actually is also quite interesting. And I believe actually that there is a big shift between pre-COVID and post-COVID. The pre-COVID was all about globalization and less government. The post-COVID is all about deglobalization and more government.
Which of course is also a factor, not just COVID, but the sort of geopolitical circumstances we find ourselves in. And I think, so Ilko, I'm going to turn to you, and maybe I'm sure you've been reflecting on some of the things that Bruno has been saying, because I think, there is, the part of regulation and education, true, it's very important. Regulation has an important part to play. Although when we were listening to Jean-Paul Servais, he was saying about the complexity of regulation at the EU level and how, from my own perspective, I think, it's very admirable what we're trying to do at the EU level, but also very complex because we're the first region doing it. And so, when you're the first, many things are held up and go wrong. And so it is problematic. But Ilko, I mean, looking at that education part, children, they need to learn from an early age. And you have been, you're teaching to students, but you're also really looking at sort of some of the awareness that can be done at a younger age. What methods and language can be used for them to create this awareness that finance is not just about pursuing profits, but creating the value for society? Ilko.
Yeah, thanks. I'll keep it short, but I do want to connect to what Bruno has just mentioned. So the definition of what is value, that is something that has been influenced obviously by the economics classes of the past. So we need to rephrase that, and there are discussions there. We need to think about what is the behavior that we want to see and what is the behavior that we want to promote. Instead of and that feeds then into things like incentive systems already for maybe for students, but then also in corporations. We cannot wait for volunteerism. We need regulation, and regulation is coming in at full speed. I would also argue for a behavioral view on regulation and not just a legalistic view. And that is something that I think that is badly needed, including things like sunsetting clauses where regulations are temporarily valid, where regulations are also conditional on stakeholder interests. And I think we need to rephrase a bit what stakeholders are. Then the classical definitions, in my mind, stakeholders are those parties with an interest at stake, and that means that that's a dynamic definition, which impacts then also governance design. And so there's a lot to do there, and maybe for this we would need to implement a little bit of a new language to facilitate all this. I call this a new ontology, and we see it already. We see chief ethics officers, we see chief sustainability officers, and so on. And so it is perfectly possible to include that new ontology. And we can do this already, as I say, from a young age and in studies. And I fully agree with Bruno's notion there. When I started teaching finance ethics 14 years ago, obviously I couldn't speak about this out loud. But nowadays it's accepted, even though there are very few professors of this subject in Europe still. But and it is mandatory where I teach. It is made a mandatory subject for the Master in Finance. So these students do learn a new ontology and a new way of looking at things. Maybe one more thing in terms of what are examples for young for graduates and students to look up to. We typically like to hear from CEOs, and that's of course wonderful. They have a lot of wisdom to share. Typically, the guest speakers that I invite and always also get are people that are on other sides of finance, away from the mainstream. And then you would need to think about fraud experts, investigative journalists, whistleblowers, and so on. People that have very distinct experience in finance, but not as a portfolio manager. per se, let's say. So that is that young people see, there are scenarios in which I can move into, fields of interest I can move into other than mainstream finance. And that's also what I see as a change with my students, by the way. Over time, everybody wants to become an investment banker or a hedge fund manager. We see a lot of people now having an interest in social impact, sustainability, and fintech. And so there's changes happening, but we need it at a faster pace.
I really like the fact that you invite not just CEOs, but also people who whistleblow. I think it's very important. I've been taking part in many conversations in the European Parliament with whistleblowers, and I certainly find that very interesting to see, but also how we saw, I mean, now there's far more awareness, but, in the past, whistleblowers were really, their careers were destroyed if they dared to speak up. I'm also thinking, as you were speaking, Ilko, because I just remember, I can't remember some regulator saying to me after the financial crisis of 2008, when they suddenly started employing all kind of different people to the usual, said, well, you need to have to catch a thief, you need to have the mentality of a thief, you need to understand. And, thief, of course, is a very strong word, but you do need to understand and see what is going behind. It's not just the glossiness of the boards that can give that to you.
And to that point, I think that we do not do a great job yet in assessing who we appoint in positions. We need, I think, this kind of awareness, both psychologically as well as ethically, needs to be evidenced and needs to be part and parcel of appointments in senior positions, but also by regulators that look into ticking off the appointments as well. And that is still missing. Soon, actually, I will publish a little blog at the ACCA by chance on this particular point, where I say there is a blind spot if you look at bank governance or financial governance in finance for what I call trust risk. And that needs to be taken care of, and that awareness needs to be created from early on.
Yeah, I think again that is a very, very important point. And one of our prize winners several prizes ago actually wrote an essay, and he was at the regulator at the FCA. He wrote an essay about living ethical CVs, things that you took with you, not just your CV if you work, but how you behave. That's right. I think that is really quite an interesting thought. And for me, I like that idea. So Marta, when we think of, our ethical CVs, when you have your students in front of you, I know that when you were talking to me beforehand, you were mentioning something about a core curriculum that was going to be taught across all different kind of undergraduate courses. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, exactly, Josina. According also in light of what the other said, now need for education. So there's a lot of universities now are making this choice of setting up and designing what is called a core curriculum. So a set of modules or courses that all the students take, irrespective of the degree that they're studying. So whether you study chemistry or architecture or business, the university offers modules which are transversal. So some universities call it core curriculum, others call it transversal skills curriculum. The idea is to build two different aspects. On the one hand, some skills which can be applicable to different kind of jobs, whatever is the sector you work in. And on the other hand, to build culture. So, for example, the teaching of anthropology, of ethics, of history, as Bruno, for example, mentioned, it's something that would be part of this core curriculum. Other universities are also investing a lot in the development of character. This is something we're also trying to do here in Dublin, for example, but I know other universities are doing in this way. So character development is key in the university education, because we do not only we do not only give the opportunity to people for people to graduate. We don't make graduates. We actually help people to grow. So that's a different perspective. So developing critical thinkers with a strong focus in ethics will help the students to for a changing job environment. We do not know today what's going to be the job market in 3 years when we enroll students, because like the pace of transformation is so high. Of course, there will be some traditional jobs which are going to be still there, but for other jobs, it's going to be absolutely interesting to have acquired these transversal skills and being able to critically think, to understand what is ethics, and also to be flexible enough and agile to adapt to this changing work environment. So this is the meaning and the rationale to offer a core curriculum in our universities. And of course, like in a way, what the prize does of trying to help young people to reflect on the culture of ethics in finance, it's something that absolutely can be part of, for example, the core curriculum for all the students studying business and finance in a university. So, because of course, core curriculum can be also differentiated. So, for example, in our business school, a few years ago, there was a big curriculum review. And so now all the undergraduate students take at least 2 modules in critical thinking. And there's some colleagues that are taking care of actually developing this curriculum every year. So I think there's plenty of examples out there of how the university is adapting to all this changing, and is trying to help students to be better people, not just great professionals.
Thank you, Marta. I'm going to come back now to when those young people that have gained critical thinking, that are set on a path of challenging and not afraid to speak out. What happens then? They come into the environment of an organization. And I remember very interestingly from a study we did jointly with the Economist Intelligence Unit and CFA Institute, where we asked people working in the city, medium-level managers, and they said, oh yeah, we all subscribe to our code of ethics and think it's very important. And then they were asked, yes, but you know, if you had to be slightly unethical because actually it's impacting your career in the bank or as a manager, wherever you are, how would you then? Oh, yes, we have to be flexible then, you know. And it's that, you know, that change. Yes, we subscribe to ethics, but of course, you know, my career, and you know, we've discussed before about, you know, this higher purpose of being more aware of where you are. So Adam, you know, employees in organizations do still find it difficult to report ethical issues to their manager, because their manager may be saying, oh yeah, but you know, you need to get this deal done because we need it for our, you know, our results. And many senior managers are still really only driving that profitability issue, and regardless of the ethical considerations. So how can they blow the whistle? How can they change? Adam?
Well, it's great to hear both Elko and Marta touching on elements that are absolutely relevant for this. It's about putting the right people in the right place at the top. And it's also about building people that have the right character to come through into the jobs. And obviously that all comes through with education as well. So obviously if we want to change that, maybe we need to be building a better education to come through, a better generation. But what do we do now with the people that we have and the management that we have? So indeed, as you say, there can be reluctance to speak up. And that's where really having a good culture within your industry, within your company, comes into play. And we've seen that companies are really trying to go through cultural shifts now to be great places to work. And there is a desire to have that change in place and become a safe place. Now, that's never going to create a situation where someone is comfortable enough to speak up about their manager in particular, or a colleague. And there has to be opportunities to do that, because no one wants to come to work in a situation that makes them feel uncomfortable or is potentially dangerous, or even, in the worst case, potentially criminal. So there are requirements to have whistleblowing hotlines in place. In Euroclear, we call it the speak up, because it gives you the opportunity to stand up, to speak up and raise something that you have seen that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with. And really importantly, it's offered in 2 different ways. Either you can do it in person, where it's very obvious that it's you making that complaint, but also it's offered as an anonymous hotline. So you can call someone internally, and that will go to a specific team who have proper training, and they will know to treat that with absolute confidentiality. Or you can even go externally. So we have these opportunities where if someone is not fully comfortable, they can still report it in a way that they would feel protected. But what's really important is that not just giving them the channels to make that reporting, but to make them feel that even if they do, that it's going to be treated with care, investigated appropriately, and that it's going to have proper consequences, not that it's going to have retaliation. And that is a big fear.
Yeah.
So as you said, speaking up against your manager, the main fear there is that it's going to reflect on your bonus potentially, or you could lose your job. So building that trust into the company where, don't worry, we've heard you, we will investigate, and we're going to take appropriate actions, is really where a lot of the work goes in. It's not installing that phone line to make sure that someone has the number to call. It's all the supportive work that goes into the psychological safety. That's where the important work is. And what's great is that we see in the industry, a lot of companies are putting that work in. What's really not encouraging is that even at these industry events, I've been discussing with some of my peers, and they're seeing real life examples where people are not comfortable enough yet to speak up. We had one example where there was actions from a senior person that was making the person I was speaking to feel uncomfortable. And they were aware, they were working in the industry as a second line, and they weren't aware that they should be speaking up about this uncomfortable behavior. And when I said, this is something that you should report, their response was, oh, but he's very senior. So there's still a lot of work to be done to break down these barriers. And I think, as Marta has suggested, with that core curriculum, to build that character, to build that awareness at an early stage, that can only be a good thing.
Thank you very much, Adam. I know that I'm going to get each of you a minute to give one final word of advice to our prize winners and our audience. So I'm going to turn first to Ilko. In 1 minute, if you can give a word of advice, final word of advice to the prize winners and to the audience.
Follow your heart.
That's good. Follow your heart. Okay. Adam, one word of advice.
Challenge and cooperate. So don't just accept what you see, and ask for lots of advice.
Great. Lovely. Marta.
Yeah, in this age with a lot of technologies, just go back to the basics, read good books, and understand that there's a difference between intelligence and wisdom when it comes to use technologies. And so try to become the best version of yourself through cultivating this wisdom.
Go back to basics and read good books. Yes. Bruno, the final word to you. One word of advice.
Well, what is required is courage. And courage is to put values above benefits. And I'd like to finish with the quotes of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a German theologian and anti-Nazi dissident who was hanged in 1945 during the collapse of the Nazi regime. He said, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. That is a very inspirational quote and a very good way in which to end this panel. I thank you all very, very much for this discussion. We could, as always, have had much more time, but I give the floor back to Paul and Virgile. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josina. Thank you to the panelists for this wonderful conversation. Very inspirational, not only to the young people, but also to the older that we are. And I think it's blending theory with practice and pragmatism with high aspiration. I think it's absolutely fundamental. And the last words of each of you were really very, very deep. So thank you. Thank you, extending far beyond ethics in finance. So thank you very much. So now we are moving to the crux of the matter, if I could say this way. We are moving to the third part of the ceremony, which is about the winners. As you know, that we received, the jury has worked hard. We have received number of papers. Out of these papers, the jury, after the round of circulation of readings, has selected 7 papers, which are called the nominees. And it took a rather long jury session in order to select and identify the winning papers. All the 7 papers are on the website, or are going to be on the website later today, and the brochure will be also available in the next days. So you can scan through the text of yourself and of those who were also on the nominated list. It took quite an animated jury session in order to select the winners. And the jury was working, always works in the conditions of total anonymity. So we don't know who the authors are, where do they come from? Are they coming from academic background or from professional background, from which part of the world, etc., etc. So it's a thrilling exercise, because once we decide who is going to win, then there is a discovery of the names and the whereabouts of the people. So we have three winners that are here on the, I'm going to say on the podium, but it's not exactly the podium. So let's start with Florian Barras, who is the second ex aequo prize, who won the second ex aequo prize for the paper, The Case of More Sustainable Banking Regulation Framework. Florian Barras is graduate assistant at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland, and he won a check of $4,000 as an award for his contribution. So I invite Florian to take the floor and to introduce himself, maybe in some depth, and also discuss and show and argue what are the main arguments of the paper and what was he aiming at when writing the paper. Florian, the word is yours. Congratulations, and the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm very honored. I am here today to encourage the dialogue between international bankers, regulators, and ethicists in favor of strong sustainability, a type of sustainability that puts nature over economic consideration. I tried to start such a dialogue during my field work, but quickly ran into obstacles in terms of access, tensions, and power play. In one notable occasion, a highly ranked sustainable officer plainly told me that it was not his role to talk about this. And this happened when trying to discuss ideas of favoring nature over profit, degrowth, and ethics. These ideas did, however, find an echo amongst the members of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. And there, my questions were met with enthusiasm, and my views were often challenged in direction I had not imagined. Sustainability took the form of spirituality. It took the form of horizontal governance. It felt much broader than simply calculating scope 1, 2, or 3. In my paper, I highlight this by arguing for regulators to assess sustainability in a more holistic and stronger way. Regulators could look at GHG emissions as well as governance, relationships, and ethical frameworks. I argue for them to see that bankers put nature and society before profit, for example, by having each bank write in their article of association ethical and sustainable goals that would prioritize nature. CEOs could carry this publicly even further. And one example that struck me was how the CEO of a bank in Denmark is known to publicly state that they care more about nature and social justice than profitability. And this may have contributed to the bank's chief sustainable officer's narrative being the strongest account of sustainability I have observed from an international banker in my fieldwork. I fear that otherwise, when sustainability becomes more and more enforced, we will witness bankers trying to find any solutions, legal and illegal, to keep profiting off nature. But that also means one crucial thing. We need to be able to talk about degrowth, a logical consequence of strong sustainability, and what it means for banking. Indeed, if banks take into account the limits of nature over economic goals, it will limit the size of the banking industry within the environmental boundaries. And from the meeting I have had with international bankers, it was clear that they were not ready to stop chasing money. This is why I believe a cultural and ethical change is necessary by seeing that profitability can also be about social justice and environmental protection. And regulators can have an important role in this transition, being the only financial actors that should be acting without individual self-interests. I wish I could have succeeded in starting this dialogue myself with international bankers during my fieldwork, but I remain extremely hopeful that this will be more and more possible in the future. And the Ethics and Trust in Finance for a Sustainable Future prize symbolizes such a collective disposition, and I am very thankful to have been able to take part in it, and very honored to be the recipient of such a prize today. And I wish to end by thanking the organizers of the prize, as well as the sponsors and the jury who ran through all our proposals. Thank you all very much.
Congratulations to you. I think that thank you for stressing the courage and the initiative that you took in order to engaging in the dialogue, which is not an easy dialogue. And you rightly stressed that the level of your approach, the level of your argument is rather macroeconomic than microeconomic. And I think this ethics, there are different locus of ethics, and the macroeconomic is one of those important locus, not the only one, but one of the important locus of ethics. So let me turn now to Mr. David Lesznik, who is, he's coming from practice. He is a valuation executive at KPMG in Poland, Katowice, and he wrote about an ethical behavior of financial influencers. He spotted a novelty somewhere on the horizon of the financial activity and dwelled the ethical dimension of this activity. So David, once again, you are second ex aequo prize with Florian Barras. You won the $4,000 of award, and the floor is yours to introduce yourself and to introduce a little bit of your argument and your approach. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, David.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to thank the jury for appreciating my work. It is a great honor for me to be awarded in such a significant competition. I would also like to congratulate the other finalists. We seem to have become accustomed to more and more ethical scandals erupting in finance every now and then. This situation is slowly becoming the new normal, and the financial sector for many already evokes natural associations with unethical practices. This shows a great need for ethical standards to be more firmly embedded in the industry. At the same time, many areas where unethical practices could potentially arise are still in the shadows and are not more widely discussed and analyzed. One such area that I have noticed is the industry of so-called financial influencers, or fin-influencers for short. These individuals, despite having no formal qualifications or professional accreditations, act as informal investment advisors and gain a significant popularity among investors through social media. The followers of a given fin-influencer, relying on their trust in his or her authority and market knowledge, in fact trust their capital and make investment decisions in accordance with the opinions expressed by the stock market expert. This creates room for manipulation of the audience behavior and so of the stock prices as well. This can be a source of unethical profits for the fin-influencer. For example, such an expert may himself first buy shares of a particular company and then persuade their followers to buy this instrument. The market demand generated by the orders of the fin-influencer's followers will result in an increase in the price, which the unethical expert can use to sell the securities at a substantial profit. Fin-influencers take advantage of the loopholes that exist in many jurisdictions regarding investment recommendations law and allow freedom of expression of such informal investment advisors. Regulators are only beginning to recognize the existence and the power of influence of this group of individuals, with the first scandals erupting in India and the United States. My article is a voice to start a discussion on the ethical problems of this very specific area of financial industry and how it can be regulated and, above all, made more ethical. I have no doubt that there is a wide range of honest stock market experts who educate investors in a good faith. These individuals can act as kind of discussion leaders, and it is advisable to work with them to promote prudent investment in society. However, it is necessary to develop a clear ethical framework for this sector in order to separate the wheat from the chaff for ethical experts from data pools. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, for this short introduction to your work. And I think the way you spotted this new phenomenon on the horizon is very interesting. Of course, there is a dimension of macro regulation, but also proper behavior and also awareness of investors, not to be caught in a kind of implicit advice. So I think it is very, very important, and the jury liked very much your paper. Let me turn now to Josiah van Reme, who is from Kenya, who is a postgraduate student in Kenya School of Law. Josiah addressed a totally different issue from the two previous authors. He addressed the issue close to algorithms and artificial intelligence, rethinking gender scoring in fair creditworthiness assessment. Josiah, you won the first prize. I congratulate very warmly on this, and with the check of $7,000. So Josiah, the word is yours, the floor is yours. If you can summarize your work and also what lead you in this direction, because it's rather uncommon, let's say, approach that you developed in your paper. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Debinski. Good evening, distinguished guests, members of the jury, and fellow participants. Let me start by conveying my sincere thanks and gratitude to the organizers and sponsors of this prize. I'm indeed honored to have been selected as one of the winners of this prize. Also, congratulations to my fellow prize laureates and finalists as well. Before I even go on, I'll be remiss if I did not recognize my dad, mom, brothers, family, and friends who have also joined us in this online award ceremony. I see you guys. Thank you. So if by chance I happen to embarrass myself today, it will indeed be in front of my entire village. So I appreciate this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you tonight. And fortunately or unfortunately, I only have a maximum of 5 minutes to summarize a 16-page paper on what is understandably a complex and somewhat technical issue in the realm of trust and in finance, ethics and trust in finance. However, as you have heard, our papers will be published shortly. Therefore, you'll get to appreciate the full flavor of my proposal once you read our papers. So basically, my paper discusses how algorithms are used to determine whether someone qualifies for a loan. Specifically, I discuss concerns over these algorithms potentially discriminating based on gender. And ladies and gentlemen, as Ms. Helen Brand just pointed out in her presentation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and algorithms, they now drive many lending decisions that impact people's financial futures. So they evaluate credit applicants in milliseconds based on thousands of data points. So these models epitomize efficiency and impartiality, per se. However, and as I highlight in my paper, emerging research suggests that algorithm bias remains sort of an insidious threat, and lending practices are undergoing a revolution driven by the exponential growth in data and the rise of complex algorithms that bind such data to make decisions. Now, these algorithms, they evaluate an applicant against thousands of data points in mere seconds to determine credit worthiness. Therefore, they promise greater precision, efficiency, and objectivity compared to fallible human judgment. However, and as I illustrate in my paper, a growing body of research indicates algorithmic decision-making propagates discrimination in subtle yet systematic ways. And I want to spend the next few minutes eliminating this risk and also proposing a mitigation strategy. Now, a core premise of algorithmic lending was to eliminate historical disparities in accessing finance. By looking at thousands of data points on each applicant and removing factors like gender, algorithms aimed to judge creditworthiness more precisely and fairly. Yet, growing evidence reveals gender gaps still persist. Let me contrast two entrepreneurs seeking small business loans. Take John, a male software developer, and Amanda, a female interior designer. If both of these people apply for credits to expand their various businesses, for example, and John and Amanda have similar personal financial profiles, that is income, assets, debts, credit scores, the likes, the only substantive difference is their gender. Yet, analysis finds that Amanda is 11% more likely to have her loan application denied than John. So why does this gap exist when gender wasn't even an input variable? Now, this scenario is playing out as more lending decisions rely on algorithms crunching massive amounts of data. So these algorithms, they aim to predict if applicants will repay their loans. So getting it right matters because wrong approvals lose money, wrong denials lose opportunities. So algorithms can grasp historical gender inequality through other related variables like work tenure and education levels. In this manner, they propagate unequal access by inheriting biases encoded in the data. So without transparency, Amanda struggles to appeal denial decisions, even though she suspects her gender influenced higher rejection rates. John, on the other hand, benefits from variables that favor his profile. Though their qualifications are similar on paper, Amanda must overcome extra hurdles like explaining resume gaps, for example. So John's and Amanda's scenario reflects a contentious debate around algorithmic bias. And at the core is the fact that removing sensitive attributes like gender from consideration does not automatically ensure fairness. And as you shall see from my paper, multiple studies demonstrate algorithms can propagate discrimination despite lacking direct inputs like gender. How so? Through correlations with other variables that embed historical inequality. So the question becomes, what if these actually hide bias that can still creep in? So it is important that we recognize that algorithms can indirectly incorporate gender biases through other factors. And for instance, a certain gender may have faced barriers accessing higher education or accumulating wealth. So this is the central thrust of my paper, that bias can persist in creditworthiness assessments, even if gender scoring itself is banned. So what is my proposal? I suggest a different approach. So instead of banning gender scoring in creditworthiness assessments, we should include gender in the algorithm calculus itself. But then we also need to examine how many errors algorithms make. Two types of errors to be specific. Number one, false positives. That is, these are errors that arise from approving people unlikely to repay their loans. And number two, false negatives. These are errors arising from denying people likely to repay. So at some danger of oversimplification, the proposed alternative places the burden upon lending institutions to rigorously monitor algorithm system performance by customer segment, that is the male and female gender segment. In particular, by mandating report of false positive rates when credit is extended to those unable to repay, and false negative rates when creditworthy recipients are denied. So where material divergence emerges in error rates between these genders, it signals and it should signal the presence of discriminatory bias within the model. So inputs or scoring can then be adjusted until error balance is achieved across these segments. So that was basically my argument in very simple form. And I urge scientists, policymakers, and finance executives to collaborate honestly around these complex challenges. And as we heard earlier from Ms. Brand, let us strive to make technology our servant and not our master. Enterprising people like John and Amanda in my example depend upon the financial system upholding its promise of impartiality. The futures they hold the futures they could unlock may one day save your loved ones too. So let's keep this conversation going. Thank you so much to the organizers, sponsors, judges, and I appreciate this prize. Thank you.
So I hope that the three winners can hear the applause through the website and Zoom, etc., etc.